What are some of the things that the actors, the TV channels, and all of these people are most reluctant to say? What are the most pressing issues?
Well, immigration, of course, which I see as being the top, issue facing this country. Immigration, Islam, Islamist extremism, if you want to make that distinction. And also, I think as well, the way in which our government is increasingly sort of extra parliament, how basically we increasingly have government by quangocracy, by unelected officials, unelected committees, climate change committee, people like that. That has grown and grown over the past 10 years. And they're all interconnected. But you will get stuff, obviously, on climate change, which is going to obviously, on the TV this is, which are obviously is going to be very, very pro the climate change agenda. The idea that you would have some program or documentary which was very, in some ways, sympathetic to, for example, take an elderly couple who see their area change out of all recognition, for example. That's a very, very widespread situation at the moment. And the fact is it would make considerably, important drama, I would say as well. But the idea that you see something like that, it's just unthinkable. I think it's just as these things have become far more obviously to the fore, there are more attempts. And this is not a conspiracy, Andrew. It's just there are more attempts to somehow or other play them down. People are very wise to it. I think now.
I think so, and I guess so. One of the issues you raised there is Islamism, and that's clearly an issue. We talked about, Stacey Dooley's documentary some time ago, couldn't be made now. Is it possible that the UK could suffer the kind of fate suffered by Lebanon and Iran and I think Turkey right now, where the Islamic population grows to an extent where they have a political foothold?
Well, they already have got a political foothold. I mean, one of the interesting things is that in the last election, people were, quite rightly drawing attention to the size of the Labour majority, to the fact that Reform got 5 MPs, but there are now, if you include Jeremy Corbyn, there are now 5, what I would call Islamist MPs. I mean, basically sectarians. And these are people who are pro-Gaza. That's how they got elected. They're independent. They formed a little group. Okay, it happens to be Gaza now, but, who knows, in the future it might be some other issue. But so it's already there. And yet this has had very little comment about it. There was also an organization called Muslim Vote, the Muslim Vote, very, very confident just after the election. Look what we've done, to get the Muslim vote out. So in other words, purely on the basis of being Muslim. So I think that we're seeing the beginnings of it. We've had it in the general election. So that does worry me hugely, and I think it worries most people, actually. But such has been the kind of approach, by government, by media to this, that obviously people feel extremely inhibited, about criticizing or actually protesting about it. Also, the thing that does worry me a lot is that, the actual attitudes of a wider Muslim community, which is, people say, oh, you mustn't sort of, you can't tar all Muslims with the same brush. Of course, no one is saying that you do that. But when you look on a whole series of issues, whether it's position of women, position of gay people, free speech, Sharia law, it should worry everybody.
Do we know what kind of percentage of British Muslims?
Well, there are many surveys that have basically been done, obviously, over the past few years. Most recently, the Henry Jackson Society did one. And it showed, for example, this very alarming statistic that basically the majority of Muslims in this country just didn't believe that Hamas had raped and murdered in Israel. Something like 3/4, a huge number. And then underneath that, then you have, for example, 32% wanting Sharia law.
Wow.
Would prefer Sharia law. Now, I'm not a mathematical wizard, Andrew, but what, 4 million Muslims, 32%, what is that? That's a sizable number of people wanting Sharia law. About 52% thought that there should never, ever be any depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, for example. What is very alarming about all of these kind of figures is that there's no pushback on them from, if you like, our establishment or even our established political parties, actually. There's no real pushback. But also it is that the younger that you get, the more radical they are. Now, so like the 18 to 32, group of Muslims, young Muslims. And that's going to have huge, impact on the whole feel and quality of our society, And I think that there is there is obviously a fear of actually even talking about this, because you have this kind of view that, oh, well, look, actually majority of, Muslims are, obviously peace-loving and decent and all of that, and they're very, very worried about extremism. Yes, that might well be true, but I'm also worried about those kind of attitudes, which in any other context would be called hard right bigoted.